You've heard of empires conquering nations, right? Well, forget that for a second. This is the unbelievable but absolutely true story of how a single private corporation, a company that started out just to trade goods, ended up bringing an entire subcontinent to its knees. We're talking about the English East India Company. It sounds completely impossible, doesn't it? I mean, how does a group of merchants, whose main goal is just to trade spices and textiles, somehow wind up ruling over millions of people and commanding huge armies? So how on earth does that happen? That's the mystery we're going to unpack. And let me tell you, this story is a wild ride of ambition, clever strategy, and ultimately, shocking betrayal. So where do we begin? Well, our story really kicks off with a massive power vacuum. In the early 18th century, the incredible Mughal Empire, which had ruled India for centuries, was really starting to show cracks. It was beginning to fall apart. See, it all really gets going after the death of the very powerful Emperor Aurangzeb back in 1707. Once he was gone, that central authority just collapsed. Local rulers, guys known as Nawabs, started asserting their own independence, and pretty soon India became this patchwork of kingdoms all competing with each other. And who sails right into the middle of all this chaos? You guessed it, the East India Company. Now, they started off as simple traders in port cities like Surat and Bombay, but they were smart, and they saw a huge opportunity to start playing the political game. The company set its sights first on Bengal, and for good reason. It was the richest prize in all of India. Its young ruler, Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah, was suspicious, and he had every right to be. He saw that the company wasn't just trading anymore. They were building forts. He knew exactly what was happening, and saw them as a major threat to his rule. And this all leads to the legendary Battle of Plassey in 1757. Now, look, on paper, this should have been an absolute slaughter. The Nawab had this massive army, we're talking tens of thousands of soldiers. The company, led by a man named Robert Clive, had just a few thousand. The odds were just ridiculously stacked against them. So how in the world did they win? Well, this is where this story takes a really dark turn. This battle wasn't won with cannons or brave cavalry charges. Nope. It was decided by a conspiracy, a dirty deal that happened long before a single shot was ever fired. The whole victory came down to one man, Mir Jafar, one of the Nawab's most trusted commanders. And he was a traitor. He had made a secret deal with Clive. At the most crucial moment in the battle, he just pulled his huge section of the army back. The Nawab's forces didn't break because of an attack. They collapsed from the inside. It was a victory won entirely by deceit. So for his reward, Mir Jafar gets to be the new Nawab of Bengal. But let's be real, he was a puppet. The company was pulling all the strings. The Battle of Plassey marked the real, true beginning of corporate rule in India. The traitor had officially become a kingmaker. Okay, so if Plassey was the foundation, the Battle of Buxar in 1764 was the moment the company cemented its power. This time, though, they weren't just facing one ruler, they were up against a grand alliance. Yeah, this time it was the whole shebang. It was a massive alliance of some of the most powerful people in northern India. You had the Nawab of Bengal, the Nawab of the very powerful kingdom of Awadh, and even the Mughal emperor himself, Shah Alam II. They all joined their huge armies together to try and kick the company out for good. But this time, the company didn't need any tricks or betrayals. They won with pure, overwhelming military power. Their smaller army was just better trained, way more disciplined, and their artillery was far superior. They absolutely crushed the combined forces of India's elite. The message was sent loud and clear. No one in India could stand against the company now. With their military dominance secured, the company's mission totally changed. It wasn't about conquest anymore. It was about pure extraction. The goal now was to bleed India of its wealth and ship it all back to London. After the victory at Buxar, the defeated Mughal emperor was forced to grant the company a game-changing power, the Diwani. This was basically the legal right to collect all the taxes from the huge, wealthy regions of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. The transformation was now complete. The company wasn't just a group of merchants anymore. It was, for all intents and purposes, the government. So, what do you think a private corporation does when it suddenly gets the power to tax millions of people? They immediately jacked up taxes to brutal, crippling levels. The human cost was just unimaginable, and it can be summed up by this one single horrifying number, 1 crore. That's 10 million. 10 million. Let that number sink in. That's how many people are estimated to have died of starvation during the Great Bengal Famine of 1770. A region that was once one of the most prosperous on the entire planet was reduced to a land of death and despair, and it was all fueled by corporate greed. The wealth of Britain was being built on the graves of the Indian people. You can only push people so far. And after 100 years of this, a century of economic devastation, ruthless policies, and total cultural disrespect, the people of India had been pushed way too far. In 1857, the dam broke. India cried out for freedom. It was never just one thing. It was a whole powder keg of issues. The relentless taxes had made millions poor. The British were seen as arrogant, always looking down on Indian religions and traditions. And then came the final spark, the infamous rumor about new rifle cartridges. Soldiers had to bite them open, and word spread that they were greased with cow and pig fat, an act deeply offensive to both Hindus and Muslims. The rebellion exploded in a town called Meerut, and then it just spread like wildfire. Rebels took over Delhi and declared the elderly Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, as their leader. And all across northern India, incredible figures like Nana Sahib in Kanpur and the legendary Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi rose up to lead the resistance. And here's what's so important to understand. This was not just a soldier's mutiny. It was a nationwide uprising. You had people from every walk of life, Hindus and Muslims, peasants and princes, fighting side by side in what many now see as India's first great struggle for independence. The Great Revolt of 1857 was fought with incredible bravery, but ultimately it would end in tragedy. And in its ashes, the final chapter for the East India Company itself would be written. The company's response was overwhelming and unbelievably brutal. The rebellion was crushed, thousands were executed, entire villages were burned to the ground, and the last Mughal emperor was captured and sent into exile, extinguishing the flame of a dynasty that had lasted for over 300 years. But the revolt had shaken the British government in London to its very core. They decided the East India Company could no longer be trusted to run India. So, in a final, incredible irony, the company's own brutality sparked the very revolt that led to its downfall. In 1858, the company was dissolved, and India was placed under the direct rule of the British Crown. This was the beginning of the British Raj. The corporation was finally gone. But its legacy, 200 years of plunder, of subjugation, of policies that completely shattered a society, that would last for generations. Its story is a powerful, and honestly a painful reminder of just how high the cost of freedom can be. And that leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? In a world that's still shaped by powerful corporations and global politics, what can we actually learn from the story of a company that conquered a country? What does it teach us about the unchecked marriage of corporate greed and political power? And maybe more importantly, about the enduring power of unity in the face of it?